So today we're going to talk about cost sheets, and Erica Mowrey from the Mowrey team in Williamsport is going to be joining us from the North Central PA office to talk about cost sheets. The important thing here in the cost sheets is not the platform that you use for calculating it, because you may have your own method. Bright MLS will have its own. You might have other calculators out there, but what's important is the things that go into that cost sheet and how you arrive and calculate these things. So without any further ado, Erica, what do you got for us?
Well, I train on this particular form a lot with my team, and I find that it's extremely overwhelming to people, and they call it the dreaded cost sheet. It's what they do last. It's what they're most intimidated by. And a lot of that has to do with them not really understanding it themselves and not necessarily knowing it well enough to be able to explain it to a consumer. And so you're either kind of fudging it or brushing past it. But I don't know if this is true for all of you guys at all of your locations, but we're dealing with buyers who have about $12. Is that accurate? Do you guys have buyers that have no money? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we know exactly how much money they need to bring to the closing table, and we need to know what the lenders are offering. Does anybody here have a hard time getting a buyer's estimated, like an estimated cost from the lender? Does anybody not get that from their lenders before they write an offer, or have lenders that won't give them one?
Murphy, I know you were having problems pulling one out of a bank recently.
Yeah, she was a pain in the ass. I don't even think I got it yet. And I
Oh,
close on
wow.
Thursday next week.
Yeah.
But Nadine sent it to me.
Well, that's a closing disclosure, but what I'm talking
Yeah,
about, yeah.
the call sheet. Yes, I still haven't received anything.
I work with quite a few lenders, and if they don't give me a cost sheet, I typically find a different lender, because how can you advocate for your client if you don't know how, their interest rate, you don't know the loan, you don't know what the loan officer is charging, you don't know what their fees are. And if you have these buyers that are really strapped for money, how can we put together an offer and negotiate seller's assist or whatever we need without knowing those things? So I really like to get a cost sheet, but if I have a lender that just will not give me one, one of the things I want to go over with you today is, what is a typical fee to expect in each section? So if you don't have a cost sheet, you can intelligently put one together. And I always tell my buyers, when I do the cost sheet, I like to overestimate so that you're overly prepared and pleasantly surprised at the closing table, and then not shocked that you don't have the money that you need to close. So I'm going to explain a little bit about what can be an expected amount in that section. Now, that could vary by location and title company, so you definitely want to make sure you know what fees are typical in your area and with your lenders. But it should at least give you a starting point, I would hope. And then when I train, I typically have multiple personalities, because I go from agent mode to consumer mode. So I'm going to talk about each section with you, break it down from a realtor perspective, but then I'm going to pretend that one of you is my client, and I'm going to explain it to you as if you were a first-time buyer and I'm sitting across the table from you and you have no idea what any of this stuff is. So we're going to kind of jump back and forth. So apologize if I seem like two different people, because that's what I'm doing. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to send my request over so I can share it. All right. I guess it's this one. Okay. Oh, no, where to go? Come back. All right. I can't see you guys right now. Sorry, I don't know how to, well, I'd like to see you, but okay. All right. All right, can you guys all see? I have a couple different windows open because I'm going to be jumping around. But right now, I'm in my buyer's estimated cost sheet from Dotloop, and I'm in the PAR form. So I know that some of you guys use Bright, and I use a modified version of these forms, so bear with me on that as well. But you guys can see that on my sheet, do you see mine's labeled FHA, buyer's estimated cost sheet. And that's because I have 3 different ones in my dot loop. I have one for FHA, one for USDA, and one for conventional or VA. And that's because I've programmed mine to auto-populate. So mine will auto-populate transfer tax, they'll auto-populate your base loan amount. For FHA, they're gonna auto-populate upfront mortgage insurance premium, monthly mortgage insurance premium. And that was kind of how I was trying to make my life a little bit easier. Because one of the things that kind of drives me crazy is when I have agents that maybe they did get a cost sheet from the lender and the lender wrote it for 250 and you want to write an offer for 240 and you're like, I can't write the offer. I don't have a cost sheet for 240. You don't need to get another cost sheet just because you don't have one for the exact amount of the offer that you're writing. You should be able to manipulate and know how the numbers work on the sheet that you can write in. As long as you know the basic fees from the lender, you should be able to modify these numbers. So let's first look at the title section. So when I talk to a buyer, I say this first section, all is going to be fees that relate to title. So first, you have title insurance. And this is a set fee in the state of Pennsylvania. It's not something you can shop for, and it's determined upon your purchase price. Actually, I have a test for you guys. There's 2 fees on your closing cost sheet that are determined on the purchase price. What are they?
Your transaction fee and commission?
Well, if commission, yes, that's true, but that's not well, let's pretend that's not typically on your
Transfer tax.
transfer tax is determined on your purchase price, and then I already said the other one. Title insurance, right? So I have these buyers, you ever have a buyer that goes, hey, I'm making an offer for 240 and you negotiate to 245. Oh my gosh, what's my closing cost now? Not much more than what it was before because your fees really don't change dramatically except for those 2 fees and of course your down payment. So your title insurance, and I usually put standard here, not enhanced. Let's check that off. This is determined on your purchase or on your purchase price. So I know if you guys correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, but in Bright, that auto populates for you. Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So if you're using Bright, and you put the purchase price in, that field will auto calculate for you. I have now created we in lowly flex MLS land do not have those features. So I've created my own spreadsheet that does all of that for me. And I'm going to reference it in this training, but I'm not going to dive deep into it. If you like it, I'm happy to share it with you. And maybe that could be a training for another day. But prior to having my spreadsheet, I used to just go right into, find a Pennsylvania title rate calculator and I would type the amount in there. So I'm going to be writing an offer for this pretend house. Okay. And I have a cost sheet for 200,000. So we're going to write an offer today for 190. So I'm going to put 190 in here. And I'm going to use the sale price. So $1,538. We're going to plug that in there. All right. Now you'll see that I have a couple fees that are pre-filled, right? Closing protection letter, and endorsements. So I always have those pre-filled because I find that the closing protection letter is pretty much a standard 125 across the board. Is that the same for you guys down there?
Yeah, 125, 150. And then there's 3 endorsements where each are $100 a piece.
Yeah. And I've talked to a couple different title companies about endorsements because some people say 300. I've seen it as 550. I've seen it by 400. It all depends on the risk level of the property. So some of the more riskier properties might have other endorsements. If you ever want to stump a title company, ask them what they are because I've asked them before. They couldn't tell me.
What the high risk properties are?
No, like what the endorsements actually are. So
you can find on the American Land Title Association website, they have another calculator that you can actually select what endorsements, and it'll tell you dollar to dollar what those endorsements are for a commercial property, a vacant property, etc.
Oh, cool. So I typically have 300 in there, but you can put anywhere between 3 if you don't have a cost sheet or your lender's sheet seems, sometimes I get a cost sheet from a lender and I'm like, these fees seem totally wrong in comparison to what our local title companies charge. I think anything between 300 to 500 there would be reasonable to put if you're doing this cost sheet and you're doing it without any assistance from a lender. Then you have settlement and notary fees. Typically, a lender is going to have, you know, some kind of fees in the title section. It could be for what processing, it could be for notary, anything in that title section. If you have a cost sheet, I would just add up those little fees and stick them in there. If you don't have a cost sheet from a lender, I usually put like $150, just to account for any small fees that a title company might charge, among the basic fees. Then I don't typically have anything for mechanics, lien insurance, recording fees. That varies from lender to lender as well, and from title company to title company, but I've seen anywhere from $250 to like $400 in that section. So I think I usually put in $250 because that seems to be average in the area that I live. If your lender, I mean, you can put whatever your lender has on their sheet if they give you one, but if they don't give you one, I would say 200 to 250 to 350 would be a fair number to put in that category. And I actually do have a cost sheet I pulled up here. Where'd it go? I'm going to open it back up. Yes. Because I'm going to kind of use their numbers. So here's one of the ones, and I whited their name out. But if we're looking, of course, every cost sheet is different. But if we look in this section, recording fees, they put $233. So if you have the number, use their number. If not, that's okay. Then we'll just, all right. And then transfer tax is 1% of the purchase price. So I better put my purchase price down here, 190. And my sheet auto populates. So then now this section, unless you're getting a survey, which I typically don't see, this section in section 1 is complete. So let's talk about that a little bit. What? Hello?
Your purchase price 200 or is it 190?
It's 190. I'm
Okay.
using the
Thank
cost
you.
sheet that I'm using is at 200. And I'm pretending that the lender gave me a cost sheet for 200, but I'm going to write an offer for 190. And I'm doing that because I want to show you how you don't need to have a cost sheet that is the exact numbers to be able to write an accurate one yourself.
Thank you.
Yep. So let's explain section 1 now as if you were my buyer. So let's make Christy my buyer. All right, so Christy's a first-time buyer. This is our first time writing an offer. She knows nothing, right? So, all right, Christy, we're gonna go over your buyer's estimated cost sheet here. I know you've already looked at the lender one, but I just want to take a couple minutes to break down these fees and explain them to you and why you have to pay them and where these numbers come from. So let's first look at the section 1, which is title. All right, in the first section here is your title insurance, okay? So I don't know if you remember when we went over this, Christy, but once we get your offer accepted, right, I'm talking it into existence, I'm going to give you some choices for some great local title companies or attorneys. You're going to pick one, and that person is that company is going to do a title search for you. What that means is they're going to research the property. They're going to make sure that all liens, taxes are paid off and that you own the property free and clear except for the current mortgage that you're taking out. So they're going to issue you an insurance policy for that. That way, if anything ever comes up that they missed, that's what that insurance policy is for. Part of that insurance policy package is a closing protection letter as well as title endorsements. The best way for me to explain title endorsements to you, Christy, is to say that those are like additional insurance riders. And what I mean by that is, you know, some things in Pennsylvania, they don't require us to do. For example, surveys. They don't require you to have a survey where other states do. So that's one of the 3 endorsements is surveys. And so they give you a little extra insurance riders to cover that. And that's what those endorsements are. Down here in section E are some settlement and notary fees. So they're just some small administrative fees for settlement things that the title company is going to charge you. They're going to record your mortgage and your deed at the courthouse for public record, and there's a fee for that recording. And then right here in section G is transfer tax. Transfer tax in the state of Pennsylvania is 2%. 1% is paid by the buyer and 1% is paid by the seller. So you'll see that our offer here is 190. So that's why 1% is 1,900. So in this section, Christy, there's only 2 fees in here that might change ever so slightly. If we negotiate, let's say we negotiate to 200, 2 fees are going to change. One is your title rate insurance, because that's dependent on the purchase price. But if it goes up, it's only going to go up maybe 40, 50 bucks. We're not talking anything extravagant there. And transfer tax, of course, 1% of 200 would be 2,000. Does that make sense to you, Christy? And she would say, of course, because you explained it so amazing. And then we would look at section 2. Now, section 2 is pretty straightforward. That's just Iron Valley's broker fee. All right. So whether you're $395 or mine says $495 because I'm a team. I think all of us are pretty comfortable with that section, but explaining it to the buyer, they should already know what that fee is because you would have gone over it in your buyer agency. But I would just remind them, section 2 here is our broker fee. That's Iron Valley's fee that they charge to oversee our administrative fee to oversee your transaction for compliance. And then we move to section 3. Section 3 is homeowners insurance. So I've been putting $1,000 a year in the premium box. And then I usually do 3 months worth of payments in the lender escrow box. Is that how, because that seems to be about average. Is that kind of what you guys are seeing as well? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, larger properties, I'm gonna go higher. I mean, I used to on a $200,000 property probably do $750 or $800, but premiums seem to be going up, so.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, if you're doing a bigger property or something, you might want to use a bigger number. So I have that pre-filled in, but that doesn't mean that you can't change it. And that's what whether you're using any of my pre-filled sheets or my spreadsheets, just because I have a number in there doesn't mean that's the number you have to use. It just gives you a guideline of what would be reasonable in that section typically, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
and we're saying estimate every time because.
Yep. And so here's how I would explain that to the consumer then. All right, Christy, section 3 has to do with your property insurance. So once you're under contract, your lender's going to require that you get homeowners insurance. Now, this is something we can help you shop for. This is something that's not set in stone, but I've been seeing a typical rate for a standard single family home is about $1,000 a year. And then what your lender is going to do is they're going to take about 3 months worth of payments as homeowners insurance payments to start what's called your escrow balance. Now, remember we talked about how part of your monthly payment every month is homeowners insurance and taxes, right? So every time you make a payment, that money gets held in an escrow account. So if you take 1,000 and divide it by 12 times it by 3, that's where I got that number. So they're just putting 3 months. So you're going to pay for your first year of homeownership up front. So your first year, 2025, will be covered. And when that bill is due for next year, your mortgage company is going to go ahead and pay that for you out of the money that you've set aside in that escrow account. And what they're doing here is they're just starting that balance so that as you make payments every month, they know that they have enough money in that account to pay that when that bill is due. Does that make sense? Okay, and then usually they don't question me on that. So, all right, now we're going to look at taxes. So for you guys using Bright, does it prorate them for you?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, that's lovely. So we don't have that option. And every time I work with a lender, they always have, they just put in like 11 months worth of taxes and call it a day. Like they don't break it down. I mean, for a long time, I kind of kept it pretty general, but I've now created a spreadsheet for all the counties that we work in that actually allow us to prorate it. So I'm gonna I'll just show you this quick, just because you might like it. But I'm gonna prorate some taxes for you, and I kind of want to take a second to make sure you understand how taxes actually work. So we're gonna look. Here's my spreadsheet. And then I have a tab down here for every county that I'm working in. So I've been using this house as my example right here. We need to know what county it's in, which is in Lycoming County. And I need to know the assessed value, which is $63,600. So I'm going to come over to my sheet, and in here, I'm going to go to Lycoming County, and I need to figure out what day we're closing on. So what day, somebody shout out a day. What day do we want to close this deal on?
17th.
Of June?
Sure.
All right, 6/17/2025. 6/17/2025. Does anybody know why I have two sections? Whoa, something's not right. Hold on. Whoa. Maybe I should go a little slower there. All right. Okay. Does anybody know why there's two separate sections, one for municipal and county and one for school? And why
Municipal
the
and
date
county
is-
or calendar year, school and fiscal year.
Exactly. So if you look at the start date here for county and municipal is when you're closing. So you're basically paying them back for the rest of June, July, August, September, October, November, December. And school, you're really only paying them back for 13 days in this scenario. So then we have to come over here, put the assessed value in, and then multiply it by the millage. And then that's going to multiply it by the days. And my calculator does that for you. If you were unclear on how to do it, if you didn't have a fancy calculator, you would just take the assessed value, multiply by the millage, and divide that by 365 and multiply that then by however many days. And that would be how much your prorations would be. So, and we can dive into that another time as well if you'd like to. But for me, for county, it's 6.5%. And then I'm just going to come down to my chart. This is what township? We are in Jersey Shore Borough. So I'm going to come over to Jersey Shore. Where are you? Jersey Shore, it's 9.838. So I just put that in there for 9.838. It formats it for me and then spits out the amount, which is really nice. And then school 18.7178. All right, and then now I have my prorations. So I can come right over now to my cost sheet and put them in there. Now, if I'm using my spreadsheet, I normally take the taxes then and I put them. So the monthly taxes or the yearly taxes are here. I'm going to put them here. Go back to, this is an FHA loan. So I'll go to my FHA tab because each one is different. Put my purchase price in, my taxes. And it'll break it down monthly. So I see my monthly amount and then usually I'll do escrows for the taxes of 4 months to start your escrow balance. So 748. 48. So now, that wasn't right. 748. That's what I said. All right, so now that section is done. I know that was really fast. Any questions about where those numbers came from in this section before I explain it to Christy?
Nope.
Just point of reference, everybody know, if you Google your local county, you should be able to find a 2024, 2025 tax year breakdown, just like Erica has saved there.
I know our MLS has it uploaded in the intranet section, so.
Yep.
But any questions on how to come up with those numbers or where they came from? All right, so let's talk about explaining this then to your buyer. Okay, Christy, so section 4 has to do with taxes. So there's 3 taxes that are all lumped together when you pay, as part of your monthly amount that you pay each month. And there's school, county, and municipal. So the seller will have already paid the taxes for the current year. So at closing, you're going to pay the seller back for the portion of the year that you're going to own the property that the taxes have already been paid. So we're going to go ahead. So in this section, this is prorated. So we're saying that we're going to close on June 16th. So this is just you paying him back for the rest of the year. So here's how much you would pay for school, for county, and municipal. And that's assuming that we close on the 17th, that's approximately what you're going to pay the seller back as part of your closing costs. In section D, we have what lender escrows. And this is the same concept that we just talked about in section 3, where the lender is going to take a few months worth of tax payments in order to start your escrow balance, because as part of your monthly payment, like we said, your taxes are part of that. So when the bills come out, they want to make sure there's enough money in the escrow account to pay for them. So they're going to start your escrow balance by taking about 4 months worth of taxes. So did you have plenty of money in there? Any questions about that, Christy? Quick, right? So that would be section 4. All right. Okay, so then we're going to come down here to inspections. And this part I think you guys are probably pretty comfortable with, and I'm sure fees vary from inspector to inspector and also location to location. Our area, you're going to see inspection fees from anywhere for a home inspection, $300 to $450. So I would just put something, if you don't, you've already discussed at this point what inspections you guys are having. So in our scenario, what inspections do we want? What do you guys want to do?
At least whole house.
Okay, and I have a question for you. Is there anything required for FHA? Like, do we have to do any inspections?
The appraiser will do that.
I don't think, so you're Christy's husband in this scenario now, Justin. And let's just talk about that for a second, because buyers really don't understand the difference between an appraisal and an inspection. So yes, the appraiser is going to go out and they're going to look for those safety requirements we talked about for your loan, like peeling paint, handrails, smoke alarms, but they're not there to look to judge the inspect. It's not the same as an inspection. An inspection is a third party that you hire that's going to educate you about the home and point out any kind of potential maintenance for the future, and then also material defects. So those are two separate things. Good point, Justin. But back to my question.
The
What?
water test is an inspection that FHA requires,
Is it though?
which technically it's a test of the water, it's an inspection of the water. So that's technically a paid-for service that has to be done, and it is a contingency on the purchase of the house for FHA.
It's actually, if you're going straight FHA, there are no required inspections. If you were going through, unless the appraiser comes back and then asks for it later. So you can actually have no inspections for FHA unless you're going through PHFA. If you're going through PHFA, they're either for the rate or to get the K-FIT program, then you do have inspections, and then it would be a pest and it would be require a well inspection if it was private water. So, so fun fact on that. So let's go, let's just say but we're still advising them. I'm gonna put 350 in here for a home inspection, and I'll put 75 in here for a pest inspection. So when I explain this to my buyers, Justin and Christy, I just say, okay, this section is your home inspection section. We've talked about wanting a property inspection and a pest inspection. And these are some average fees in this area. Once again, just once we get your offer accepted, I've already shared that I'm going to send you some options for title companies or attorneys. I'm also going to send you some great inspectors that I work with and I trust. And so, of course, depending who you pick, this fee could, differ ever so slightly, but it will be about that. Any questions there? And then we move on. So in reality, sections 1 through 5, you really should not need anything from a lender to complete 1 through 5. Those are all, title is pretty much standard fees for whatever title companies that's standard for your area. And all the other fees have nothing to do with loans. So you should be able to do 1 through 5 really without a cost sheet from your lender. Section 6 is where it really matters because you do really need to know their loan origination fees. So if I have a lender who won't give me a cost sheet, I'll go, well, what do you charge for origination and what do you charge for appraisal? And then what is the interest rate that you're charging my client? And it's important because sometimes does anyone know like if you don't have an origination fee, what would be a reasonable amount to put into that section that would be considered typical for the industry?
$1,250 to $1,500, something like that.
I mean, that's probably about right, but I've been told 1% of the loan amount.
And I do 1% of the loan amount, and that kind of bundles together a bunch of origination and document prep fees. But yeah, if you want to be on the safe side, if you're going through a broker, it might be 1%. If you're going through a bank, or another lender, then it's probably closer to that, 1,500 bucks, but you might have other fees in there for document prep and stuff like that.
And I say to people, sometimes you're looking at this cost sheet and you're like, it doesn't look like the PAR form. Where do these fees go? Where do I put them? I just say, listen, if it finds a home on the sheet that makes sense and you can explain it to the buyer and you make sure everything finds a reasonable place on the sheet and your costs are really close to what the lender is estimating, then that's pretty good. It doesn't have to be just because if it doesn't have a little line item, find a home for it. And as long as you can explain that to the consumer, it's called a buyer's estimated cost sheet for a reason. So coming back down to this section though, fees charged as a percentage of the loan. That's where I normally stick loan origination. Is that where you guys put it?
Yep.
Yeah. So sometimes if the buyer is paying for points, I sometimes put the points there instead. Because that kind of is a fee charged as percentage of the loan.
Yep.
And if that's so if they're, like I said, I don't think there's really a particular spot you have to put it. I will normally put loan origination here. If they're buying points, then I might go ahead and put loan origination as a line item down here. But once again, as long as it finds a home on the sheet that makes sense to the consumer and to you, that's good enough. So let's take a look at our cost sheet then and look to see what this lender is charging. So if I look in, okay, move over. Too many tabs. All right. I'm looking here. I do see some points, right? And no, I don't. I'm lying. I see a funding fee, a processing fee, an underwriting fee. I'm gonna lump those together and make that the loan origination, because of course they can't just call it loan origination, which would make our lives a lot easier and make it less confusing for us, right? So I'm gonna put that there. Then I'm gonna come over here and they have the next line item on here is appraisal and credit report. So I find those two line items on my cost sheet and I add them together. So we have 575 and 135. Who can get that faster? The fastest.
710.
Okay, sounds good. All right, we're at 710 there. I don't normally have anything in mortgage insurance lender escrow, but do you see I have something pre-filled here in mortgage insurance premium. Now this is an FHA loan. So what is that? Does anyone know what a mortgage insurance premium is? Does anyone know how it's calculated? Does every what?
Go ahead.
Does every loan have one? What? Susan's shaking her head no, because she's right. What depending what loan you're looking at, most of them have some kind of fee like that, whether it's mortgage insurance premium, USDA, they might call it your USDA guaranteed fee, whatever they want to call it, it's the same concept. And VA may or may not have a VA funding fee. So but does conventional have anything like that?
I believe it can if it's the total owed is less than 20% or more than 20%.
If that's
Susan.
monthly, they would have monthly PMI. You're accurate in that, Susan, but this fee is not the monthly fee. This is something separate that they charge. So no, conventional loans, cash, nothing like, you wouldn't see that, but you will see something for FHA, USDA, and VA, and they're all calculated differently. But it is a mathematical calculation. It's not this magic for most scenarios. For FHA, it's mathematical. USDA, it's mathematical. Conventional, it's not. It's going to be dependent on how much they put down and their credit score. So when it comes to monthly PMI, there is no upfront PMI with a conventional loan. So if we're looking back at this cost sheet then at the mortgage insurance premium, where the heck did that $3,000 come from? And that's a lot of money. Does my buyer have to pay that? I mean, it's on the cost sheet, but do they have to pay it out of pocket? Do we know? So this is what I think is kind of confusing when you look at these cost sheets for FHA and USDA. These fees, these upfront mortgage insurance premiums can be big numbers, but they get financed into the loan. So when you see it on the left, it gets subtracted on the right. So when you look at that total on the left, you're like, ooh, that's a lot of money. But that's $3,200 higher in theory of cash that they have to come up with because it's not coming out of their pockets, it's being financed into their loan. That being said, when you put their loan amount on the contract, you should be including that fee, not putting just, well, what is the down payment for FHA? Does anyone know?
Is it 3.5 minimum?
It is. Susan's getting all the gold stars. You with your muted microphones are not. So, all right. So let's go back and look at this fee because where did it come from and how do I calculate it? Because if you look at my spreadsheet here, or I'm sorry, my cost sheet from the lender, they have it on here, right? They have a mortgage insurance premium, but it's $3,378 and mine is only $3,200. Why is it different? Well, my cost sheet is not for 190, it's for 200. So does anybody know how to calculate this fee? Okay, well, let's do it together. If you have your phone, get your calculator out. All right, the asking price is 190,000, right? And how much are they putting down again for FHA? What's the minimum amount?
3.5%.
Okay, so if we subtract 3.5%, what is the base loan amount?
183,350.
Okay, so you see up on my sheet, that gets plugged in right up here, 183,350. Now, do you notice down here, this number is bigger? Why? Because that includes that fee, but let's go back to that. Now, so we all have 183.50 or 350 on our calculator. There's a decimal amount that this gets multiplied by, and that's how the upfront mortgage insurance premium. Does anybody happen to know what that decimal is? It's 1.75% for FHA. So if I times this by 1.75%, that's where that number came from. Okay, so if you're writing a loan, you should be, you know, that it's not a huge difference from the $200,000 cost sheet. They had what hers was 378. It's like $170 difference, right? So it's at the end of the world if you put their number and not the correct number. Probably not, but I have buyers that $170 makes a difference. So you should know how it's done. So that's where that number came from. Then back in this section, you might have some additional fees like Justin mentioned. They might have like attorney doc fees, tax service fees, all these kind of miscellaneous things. So if I'm looking back at my closing sheet, I see, okay, I've already got all of these, right? I got these three. I didn't account for the wire fee yet, so we'll come back to that. I've got my appraisal. I've got my credit report. It is FHA. Is it likely we're going to have a final inspection? Yes. So I'm going to stick that on the bottom. 195. And let's come back here. Attorney doc prep. I'm going to stick that under preparation of mortgage documents because that makes sense to me. I made that up, but it looks good to me. And now I'm going to go back and find the rest of these fees. So we have that I didn't account for. There's a wire fee for 35. There is a $10 flood cert fee. There is a $82 tax service fee. And I've already accounted for the pest inspection, so I don't need to do that twice. So now I've got all the fees wrapped up nicely. So and that's $127, and I'm going to stick that in this little miscellaneous box. Okay, so now we've got all of our lender fees wrapped up nicely. So now I'm going to explain this to Christy and Justin. Okay, guys, so now we're going to look at this last section here. We've gone through section 1 through 5. All has to do with fees charged by your lender. So section A is all loan origination fees. These are all the things that you pay for the bank to process and underwrite your loan. you are going to have a credit, or they paid to pull your credit, and then you're going to have an appraisal. And that's what this fee is. And just keep in mind, and I really like to hammer home when they actually have to pay money, right? Because even though we show them this balance at settlement, that's not really accurate, because they've already put a deposit down, they pay for the appraisal up front, and they pay for the inspections up front. So I want my buyers to know that, because sometimes they're being gifted money. And they're like, oh my gosh, I actually have to have real money in my bank account right now. I don't need it 45 days from now. No, you're going to need it. And yes, they cash your deposit too, just in case they didn't realize that. So I talk about that there. Okay, Justin and Christy, this fee right here is called mortgage insurance premium. This is a fee that, that the lender is charging upfront, because you're getting an FHA loan, and it's part of that. I don't think I'm super eloquent in that section, so I'm going to move on. They're going to prepare your document, and there's a small fee, mortgage documents. They're going to charge for that. There's usually some kind of miscellaneous fees involved for tax certifications, flood certs, etc. And then with FHA, if the appraiser has us do any repairs and he has to come back to inspect it, he may charge you a final inspection fee. And as far as buyer agent commission down here in section 8, I've negotiated that. I'm going to negotiate that right into our offer. So that are all the fees there in a nutshell. Now let's poke over to the right side then. So guys, we have a $190,000 purchase price. You're putting down 3.5%, which is where this number came from. And then over here on the left, this big number, this 3208, you see why it's grayed out here. Even though it's on the left, it actually gets added into your loan. So that's where the 186,558.63. Okay. And then last, we're going to come over here and we're going to figure out the principal and interest. So on this cost sheet, they are getting a 5.625 for a 30-year. Now, does Bright calculate that for you guys too?
Yes.
I hate you guys and your Bright smugness.
This is an opportunity to give a plug for the Bright MLS. Anytime you're talking to anybody who's on any of your boards or associations, just tell them that you would like to be a Bright member. Thank you.
I am a Bright member, but it doesn't help me that much.
Not yet.
Not yet, but all right. So I'm going to come back. So there's a couple ways. In my spreadsheet will do this for me. So I'm going to put it 5.625, just like you and your Bright people. So that's 10. I can get it from here, or I'll show you my other old school method before I had a spreadsheet. That Dawn Dyer actually created. Plug her out, or she's here. So I'll use the Zillow mortgage calculator if I have to, just to get principal and interest if my sheet doesn't have it. So I'll put 190, 3.5, 5.625. And then I just to the principal and interest right here, and that's another place to get it. I mean, I have the Zillow mortgage calculator. It's not 100% accurate, especially when it calculates PMI, because it doesn't know what kind of loan you're looking at. But if you're sitting there at a house and your buyer wants to know, like, can I afford this? It's a nice tool. I usually train my buyers at my buyer agency to download it. And I say, if you're not sure, I said, I don't care what what price range you think you're in. What you care about is what price is my monthly payment. So before we go look at a house, I want you to run your payment. And if you don't like the payment, we're not going to go look at the house. So I train them to do that. So that way I'm not running around showing them houses that aren't in their budget. So then coming back over to our sheet, then that has their total amount here. Now, you notice they have this auto plugs for me too, is the monthly PMI. Now, I'm going to test you again. Now, I already told you with a conventional loan, and Susan said if they're putting over 20%, there's no PMI. When would be another scenario that there wouldn't be any monthly PMI?
VA?
Yeah, Susan, gold star number 500. I don't know where you're at. So VA doesn't have PMI, but FHA does. USDA has a similar fee as well. Does anybody, but FHA, there is a set calculation. It is not based on credit score. It's not based on down payment. So you'll have buyers sometimes that qualify for conventional and FHA, but they end up going FHA because the monthly premium for PMI is so much less. Does anybody know how that's calculated? That's also a set calculation. It is your loan amount times 0.55%. So let's just do that math real quick so I can show you. If you take your loan amount, base loan amount, 183,350. Is it divided or times? I think it's times 0.55%. I get a number, it's $1,008.42, but that's for the year. So I divide that by 365. And I'm not doing something right. Hold on a second. Put me on the spot. Now I'm panicking. You guys know, Christy, what am I doing wrong? Anybody?
Divide by, times 0.55 divided by 12, right?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, thank you. Panicked. Okay. And that's where the $84 came from, not 365. So that's how that's calculated. USDA, it's a different calculation. I think it's 0.35 or 0.33. But they're all these numbers they all come from somewhere. So that's another thing. You shouldn't need a new sheet from your lender. You can just calculate it yourself. If your sheet doesn't do it for you. So going back to this sheet then, let's explain this to the buyer. All right, so here's your loan amount. As you can see, it's 3.5% plus the upfront PMI that I showed you on the left-hand side. You have your interest rate that was quoted. Remember, you're not locked into that rate until you actually make mortgage application. You have principal and interest, taxes, insurance, and then you have that PMI because you are not putting 20% down. Another question about FHA. Does PMI fall off with FHA? I know no, it's on there for the life of the loan. All right, so down here then, this is your purchase price. Here's your total cash required, which is your purchase price plus your closing costs. Subtract what you're borrowing, and here's your balance due at settlement. Now I'll put I personally find this to be confusing. Let's say we're doing a $2,000 deposit. Now it's showing that they only need 15,000. They don't really need 15,000 at settlement because they've already paid the 2,000 and they've already paid appraisal and they've already paid inspections. So none of this really looks super, like when I'm dealing with people who want to know to the penny how much money they need. So I'll put a little box down here and I'll put 17,081.70. And when I explain this, then I say, okay, guys, see this total cash needed box? This is how much money you are going to need for everything from start to finish. So whenever they ask you for money, that's included. Deposit included, appraisal included. So this is how much money you need for everything from start to finish. By the time we get to closing, you'll have already paid some things. So you won't need that much at the closing table, but that's how much you're going to need for your down payment. Includes down payment, it includes all of your fees. And you better make sure that they have that, right? So hopefully you didn't get to this point and then they're like, oh, I need money for closing? Really? But yeah, so I like to really hammer on this is because I have people that tell me all the time, oh my God, I have to pay for my appraisal. Is that more money that I need? No, nope. I told you it was part of everything was included in that money and you told me you had that money. So I really like to make sure that they feel really comfortable with that total cash needed out of pocket for everything and that they truly understand that. But yeah, so that's that. I mean, and that's pretty much all I have on that sheet. I mean, this spreadsheet's pretty fun, and I can do that with you guys another day. One thing I just started doing is the interest from settlement. Justin, is that something you guys typically make sure you have on your sheet? And if so, do you calculate it or how do you calculate it?
For buyers, absolutely. I think it's important. And generally, whenever I calculate, I'll calculate from mid-month, or from the beginning of the month so that there's a whole month of interest on there. So that buffer exists, just in case closing gets bumped from the 17th, and we have a snafu and closing gets bumped to the 2nd. That additional cash to close, that additional interest could put somebody into a tailspin.
Yeah, and you know, anybody who's ever trained me on this never really spent any time on it. And I'm starting to get to the closing table and the buyers are like, why do I need $400 more than I thought I did? And it's this prepaid interest. So I figured out how to calculate it, and now my sheet does that too. So as long as
And why are you prepaying interest?
why?
Yes.
It's between the end of the month and when your loan closes at the end of the month.
It's from closing until your first mortgage payment actually occurs. Because when you're paying rent, you're paying it in advance of the next month that you're going to live in that house. In a mortgage, you're paying for the month that you just lived there, and you're paying for that interest. So whenever you have closing, you're paying the interest from that day into the future until the next one hits.
I had a question about that though, because if, let's say you close in May, your first payment's not going to be July 1st.
Right, and you're
But
paying.
you're only going to pay 15 days or whatever of prepaid interest. Why
Right,
don't you
you're
have to
paying,
pay 45 days?
well, you're paying that first, great question, but you're paying that first interest from there until the next first day of the month. And then when the next first day of the month comes, you're paying for the month that you just lived
I
there.
got it. It's for it's backdated, like it's
Yep.
a month prior. So,
Yep.
okay, that I couldn't explain that because I didn't understand it. So cool. So just back to that little section then. On my sheet, you have to, it's, if we say what, 6/17/2025. So then they would have 13 days worth of prepaid interest. So it'd be 367.33. Does anyone know how to calculate that? I just taught myself this. So what basically in this situation, you take your loan amount and times it by your interest rate, divide it by 365, and then multiply that by how many days are left in the month. So, your lender's usually going to just put some on there. She's going to probably put like 15 days on average. Does Bright calculate that too?
Yep.
Yeah. So
Now-
that's really nice. But if anybody ever has any questions in regards to where these numbers come from or how they're calculated, you can always ask. I think it's helpful to understand it, even if you have a tool that does it for you. Because one day your tool might break or somebody might ask you a question and you won't be able to answer it. But overall, I mean, these cost sheets don't have to be intimidating, but they do need to be accurate, and it's really important for your buyer to truly understand how much money they need and what they need to bring to the closing table. Does anybody have anything else they want me to go over or any questions?
Can you repeat that formula again? It's loan amount times interest times what?
Yep, hold on. I have a pretty little picture. It is your loan amount. If you can see this, can you still see it? Loan amount times your interest rate. It has to be in decimal form. Divided by 365 to figure out your per day amount. And then you multiply that by however many days are left in the month after you close. And to be honest with you, I just put that into ChatGPT and it spit this pretty little picture out for me. So if you ever are stuck, you could just ask, once again, you could ask ChatGPT because that's how I taught myself and then program my spreadsheet to do that. So
That's
Good
pretty
deal.
awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us.
you're welcome. Anything else, Justin, that you want?
No, I just wanted to, I knew you had a very polished approach to this and wanted you to touch on it, and I think you did a wonderful job. What do you think, everybody? Excellent.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Nice
you did a
job.
great job.
It's so important to understand what goes into your platform. Like, what is the the calculator is spitting it out, but when your client asks you why, it's important to know why and what the basis for these calculations are. So thank you, Erica, for that. And it's also important to be able to understand what goes into this when you're looking at the seller's or the lender's cost sheet. I had an experience earlier this year where we had a lender from far away in Detroit who supplied a cost sheet to us, and I couldn't figure out why they were beating our local lenders until I looked at the tax prorations for transfer tax. They were only, or not prorations, but for transfer tax, they were only counting 0.5% for the transfer tax, and that's how they were able to beat local lenders with their estimate and win the client. So whenever you understand what goes into the cost sheet, you understand how certain lenders may be fudging the numbers to come out ahead, and it's important to have that knowledge. So
Or they're
no,
charging discount points and your client doesn't understand it.
yep,
So there, if you don't get to see it, then you can't tell if they're getting a good deal. But if you don't know what's normal in that area, you don't know you don't know how to evaluate a cost sheet and whether or not they're getting a fair deal. So,
absolutely, 100%. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your time and your expertise. And my partner, Christy, said she's explaining it and then she role plays how to explain it to your client at the same time. Brilliant. So well done. Editorial note from my partner, Christy.
thank you, Christy.
All
Hey,
right. Thank you,
Justin,
everybody.
Justin,
Yeah.
will this be recorded? Because I was doing some stuff in between, so I'd like to go back and re-listen.
It is recorded and we will distribute it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Well, hey, have a lovely rest of your Wednesday and call me if you need me. Thanks again, Erica.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Say bye, Erica.